Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be a nursing school related video. This is a question that I've gotten so many times, and it was, how do you study or take notes? And I got a lot of good feedback. People wanted me to upload a video on how I make my study guides. So I've already finished my first year of nursing school, and I can tell you guys how I've studied. So really quickly, if you're new to my channel, welcome, and if you're a subscriber that is returning, welcome back. Be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already to see more videos, and let's get right into this. First of all, organization is key. When I get my syllabus, I fill out my planner, and I make sure that I know when everything is due. So that way, if I'm able to kind of plan out my week and I know what assignments I'll be doing, I know that if I'll have a little bit of time to spend with my family, things like that, it's super important. Get organized and start managing your time wisely. Okay, so in nursing school, you're going to be expected to know a lot of information. And this is where people get confused. Some people read the textbook word for word. I tried that back when I was taking my prerequisites, and it just did not do me well. First of all, let's talk about the way one of my instructors was. One of my instructors for nursing school, she would give PowerPoints, and a lot of the PowerPoints had like key tips on what she may be testing us on. So I would always, at first I didn't know how to study. Like first semester I was kind of like typing out my notes. I was kind of doing a little bit of everything, and I felt like I was just getting a little bit overwhelmed. I also had another instructor that we had no assignments. We just had like in-class participation points, and we would have take-home exams, and then we would have some in-class midterms and things like that. And she gave no PowerPoints whatsoever. She wouldn't even lecture. So honestly, one of my biggest tips is know how your teacher is going to teach you. If your teacher gives PowerPoints, you know that you're gonna have that as a resource. If your teacher doesn't, you know that you're gonna have to kind of utilize your resources as far as your books. And what I mean by use your resources, you don't have to go and read every page, but here's a book that's gonna help you so much if you have an instructor that doesn't give PowerPoints, but they kind of want you to know a little bit of everything. This is going to be your savior with those kinds of teachers, using the textbook for that particular class. So let's talk about if your instructor does give PowerPoints. So our instructor, for example, she would give us PowerPoints, which was amazing. So I'm gonna show you one, for example, for diabetes, which is super, super heavy once you get into like second med surg, or it's just a really big disease process that you're gonna have to learn in nursing school. So this was what her PowerPoints would look like. I mean, these, and I would print them out, and I would have the little lines on the side. And so that's pretty much how I would print out the PowerPoints. So in class, I would have my textbook. I would have my textbook open. I'd have my PowerPoints, and I would have an extra sheet of paper just in case I needed to write some notes down. But for the most part, I liked writing all my notes on here. And the reason why I like to do that is because the instructor is lecturing, and when she's on this slide, I write everything that she said during this slide, and it really helps me remember what she was saying because I correlate it to the actual slide that she was, you know, talking about that. So if you guys see here, it does look a little overwhelming, I'm gonna tell you that much, but I'm not done. So for example, she was lecturing on hypoglycemia, and so here would be below, what is hypoglycemia? It's below 70. What symptoms will you see? You'll see confusion, you'll see sweating, you'll see the patient's gonna be super pale, and things like that. So I would kind of, when she was lecturing on that, I would write down everything that pretty much consisted with this. And so for example, what organ needs a constant supply of glucose? That's the brain. And just a bunch of stuff. So I would write all my notes. So all of these correlated with this slide, all of this correlated with this slide, and then all of this information correlated with this slide. Now say for example, there were times when she would go over. So I have big handwriting. So when she was talking about DKA specifically, I wrote everything on here, and it went all the way down. You see my little dashes here? I was trying to kind of separate it. And so I even had to go to the back of that page and write a little bit more notes. So this does look a little overwhelming. So when I get home, I read through my entire notes, everything. So I take time. This is part of studying. So I would write my notes in class, come home, and I would read them, and I'd be like, okay, so kind of understand and start putting, start making it make sense in my head. Once I did that, then I would go back and I would write my notes way nicer. So let me show you. For example, for liver, I would do that. I would stuff that she said in class, like the instructor would also kind of be like, okay, you guys really want to know this. When she would say that, I would highlight it. So I would write everything she said. So like, for example, Lanex, alcohol cirrhosis, it's caused by alcohol, or hepatitis, or biliary obstruction, things like that. I highlighted it. I would come home, I read through my notes. Same thing. I read through my notes, and then when I came home, I would rewrite my notes. So this was that whole, everything in here, I would rewrite it. And also any little, if you see here, nurse's rule. I don't know if you guys can see these notes very good, but there's teeny tiny little writing. They're the ones that I circled in pink. That I feel like I had to know. So for example, the nurse's rule. When it comes to cirrhosis, you want to prevent and manage any hemorrhaging. So also down here it says esophageal therapy, and also vasopressin. If they're given vasopressins, you're going to want to assess for any chest pain. And I see your little head right there. Okay. So I would write my notes, read them, and then I would rewrite them. And then that's how I would study. Usually all my notes. I actually do have a notebook that has all of my notes rewritten from all the chapters. So I'm pretty much going over everything quite a few times. So for example, just like I was talking about biliary, so everything that was on this PowerPoint, I wrote down all her notes. I read them when I got home. I rewrote my notes on here. And you can rewrite your notes on this or on an iPad, whatever kind of works for you. So that's how I would pretty much study for, especially for that week. It was kind of nice if, say we had one, I think we did have like an exam, just like a little quiz in class on liver. So I already written my notes, and I would just kind of, once I've done that, I wrote my notes over the second time, then I go back in here into my NCLEX-RN examination, the Saunders, and I go into the section that's for liver, and I make sure that I have all those key points down and really understand it, not just memorize it, but really understand the disease process, the causes, nursing interventions, things of that nature. So this book's also going to help you kind of study for HESI. I think it helped me on HESI. Now for midterm, I pretty much have all of my class PowerPoints, all the lectures that we went over, and I would set them out. And I would make sure I understood everything, and the way I would understand, or the way I would be able to distinguish whether or not I understood the information, was I would do practice questions. Now, Saunders actually does have a little code inside. I just smacked myself with my book. It has a code inside. Obviously mine's used, but if you buy a brand new one, it has a code. You can punch in that code on Elsevier on that website, and it actually has a whole kind of section where you can quiz yourself on certain questions. So like you can quiz yourself on certain things like adult health or pediatrics, and also pharmacology. So I would go ahead and do some of those questions, and if I felt like I was kind of scoring a little bit too low, I would go back and reread my notes. And once I felt I was ready, I would go back in and I would make an actual midterm study guide. So this was my midterm study guide for for MedSurg 2. So what I like to do is I would make these little kind of charts here, or tables, and that's what I would do. So for nutrition, I kind of would so for pulmonary edema, these are really important. You're going to assess both lungs for like crackles, and then your main interventions that you're going to be implementing, and then for nutrition and obesity. So for example, complications of nutrition, I would put all the complications here, and then complications and interventions. So I kind of did one side. And then what was great is I can test myself. So like, okay, if there's a complication, refeeding syndrome. So I can just kind of fold my paper over and kind of quiz myself, or Nate would help me study, or Mikey would help me study, and it would just help me kind of quiz myself a little bit better. So that is how I would pretty much study for my exams, my quizzes, and then for midterms, and same for the final. For the final, I got all of my notes, and literally it was a stack of papers because of my PowerPoints. I went through each individual PowerPoint, and if there was something I didn't understand, I'd go back in my MedSurg book and I'd just look over that portion. And also I would rewrite my notes if something didn't, you know, really make sense. And as I'm writing them, I also like to kind of talk to myself about it because it helps me remember. So another thing I did, if you watch one of my previous vlogs, for my final, I actually recorded myself reading out my notes on a voice recorder. And the reason I did that is because my instructors don't let us record them during lectures. So I went ahead and just took my own voice with the notes that I wrote, and I was able to listen to that while I was in the car, if I was going to the grocery store, or if I was washing dishes or something, just be able to utilize that as study time as well. So that is what I've done. I've passed all of my nursing school classes with A's. So far it's worked for me. I know I'm gonna have a different instructor next semester, so we'll see how that goes. But overall, it's just really utilize your resources. Don't spend too much time on reading. You don't want to do that. You want to just focus on the important points. And also, if you're a visual learner like I am, I had a hard time understanding insulin and stuff, so I drew this, and it kind of helped make sense. Kind of like if the insulin increases or the blood glucose increases, this is what insulin does, or if insulin if blood glucose decreases, this is what's going to happen. And then I also wrote drugs that are going to work on certain parts of the body. So again, this makes sense to me, but you really need to find how you understand things if you're like an auditory learner, if you're a kinetic learner, if you're like a visual learner, and some people are multiple. I think I'm multiple. So again, that's something that you should totally do. And also I can make a separate video on how to study MedSurg specifically, and how to understand the pathophysiology, because that's really important in MedSurg. MedSurg has nothing to do with memorization. So if you guys want to see something like that, let me know. Give it a big fat thumbs up. This is just mainly how I study for midterms and exams, and how I've been passing my, tests with A's. So if you guys have any further requests, please feel free to leave them down below. And I hope you guys are enjoying your summer break. I'll see you guys